As I believe a snake or serpent talked. So do you believe that?
Sure. I already believe in creation ex nihilo and the resurrection of at least one person, so a talking snake isn't that big.
Okay.
Okay. Number one, I believe a snake serpent talked, Genesis 3:1. Yes, I do believe that. Because you see, the ability to speak and communicate is not simply a naturalistic evolutionary development. We are made in the image of God. God is able to communicate. We are able to communicate because God desires to communicate with us. The lower animals are not given the same capacity for communication in the normal situation. But what the only thing that could be embarrassing about this is if you actually believe in such things as miracles, that there are rare and unusual times where God, for his purposes, intervenes and suspends natural law. Now, in this particular situation, prior to the fall, we were given very little information concerning the nature of a serpent, for example, or what the capacity of such a creature might be. But the point is, it's a supernatural incident. And I am not embarrassed by believing the supernatural because I believe Jesus rose from the dead. I believe God created the universe. And if he has a reason and a purpose to allow for the natural, normal state of things to be altered so as to bring about a special event, that's God's right. He can do that whenever he chooses to do so for his purposes in accordance with his character. And so in the incidents of the fall of man, there was an interaction between the woman and what is called the serpent, and there was communication between them. Now, I don't know the nature of that communication in the sense of how this speech took place or anything else, but yes, there's no question that this took place. And unless you're a rabid fundamentalist, naturalistic materialist, which most atheists are, even though they've never really thought through how they could possibly defend that, it's just an assumption, it's a presupposition on their part, then you wouldn't have any objection to that.
I believe a man lived in the belly of a great fish for 3 days.
On that one, I got to go with probably, because my understanding is I'm much better prepared in biblical Greek than biblical Hebrew, so I can't speak to this 100%. But I think he might have actually been dead. So either I believe a guy lived 3 days in the belly of a fish, or that a barfed up dead guy, 3 days gone, got resurrected. So you decide which is weirder, but I believe one of those things.
Okay.
I believe a man lived in the belly of a great fish for 3 days, Jonah 1:17. Well, again, that's quite possible. Actually, though, Jonah said he went down into Sheol, which is the grave. And so there would be a closer parallel, because remember, Jesus used Jonah as, talked about the sign of Jonah. There would be a closer parallel if, in fact, Jonah died and was resurrected when he was expelled up onto the beach. Because then you'd have a direct parallel to what happens in regards to Jesus, who dies, is buried, and rises again. So it's possible that happened, or it's just as possible, if not more likely, that something else happened in that instance, that you actually had a resurrection, which becomes then a paradigm, a prophetic type that is then fulfilled in Jesus. So, yeah, I'm definitely a supernaturalist. The Bible doesn't know anything about naturalistic materialists other than to say they're foolish.
That Jesus ordered the stoning of rebellious children.
All right, and allowing for the slight anachronism of using Jesus in place of Yahweh there, I would say that, yes, I'm Trinitarian, and so that Jesus was present in that decision and in agreement with that decision. So for all effects and purposes, let's see, the ordering of the stoning of rebellious children, sure, yes. Again, allowing for the slight anachronism of using the post-incarnation name of the eternal incarnate Son.
Number 3, I believe that Jesus ordered the stoning of rebellious children. Now, a number of people that I saw online criticized this for saying, well, Jesus wasn't on earth yet. What are you talking about? I don't really have any problem with putting it this way, as long as what's being understood on the part of the author is that Jesus pre-existed as the eternal Son of God, and that he, in perfect union with the Father, is the one who gave us the law. He's involved with creation. As long as you're a Trinitarian, then there's no problem looking at this. But it also, sort of begs the question why you're an atheist if you also accept that Jesus had the authority to do these things and he rose from the dead. You might want to think about what that might mean for you. But I believe that Jesus ordered the stoning of rebellious children, Deuteronomy 21:18-21. Well, I did a whole series on the Holiness Code, which included this text and numerous other very difficult texts in the Old Testament law. And I pointed out in that instance that you're probably not talking about a little 7-year-old here. You would be talking about a later teenager into early adult years. You'd be talking about someone who is a rebel against God's law, who is breaking God's law and could very obviously be one of those who would then bring about the shedding of blood, innocent blood. There's a great deal of concern in the law concerning that particular issue, making atonement for the shedding of innocent blood, et cetera, et cetera. And so this is simply a recognition that the ones who would have the first indication of such a rebellious person that could bring blood guiltiness upon the covenant people would probably be the ones who know the individual best, and that would be the parents. And so it is a call for parents to look first and foremost to the good of the holy people of God, and hence to recognize the tremendous sinfulness of the shedding of innocent blood, violence in the land, whatever else it might be that brings blood guiltiness.
I believe Jesus said that the Israelites could take virgin, it's cut off, women for themselves.
Oh yeah, let me move it.
And give 32 virgin women to Jesus. Okay. So that would be that's the spoil of the Midianites. And if you go through there, yes, there is a portion. It's 32,000 virgins given to the nation of Israel, and the tribute portion of that for Yahweh is 32. What was done with those 32? I don't know. I've always assumed that they've been pressed into service in the temple as prophetesses, as the prophetess class. But yes, again, the slight anachronism using Jesus. Yeshua ben Yusuf wasn't around yet, but the eternal Son was. So sure, no major beef with the wording there.
Number 4, I believe Jesus said that the Israelites could take virgin women for themselves and give 32 virgin women to Jesus. Now, there's some really serious confusion on the part of the author in much of this. What is referred to in Numbers chapter 31, there's a couple things there. The idea of giving virgin women to Jesus, it's just so absurd that it's hard to even know how to interact with it. But we'll go down to Numbers 31:31. Well, that doesn't make any sense, does it? I'm sorry. Is there an error in the? Yeah, the reference isn't even correct. That's that's interesting. Numbers 31:31. Yeah, has absolutely nothing to do with any of that at all. Well, that's nice. Fundamentally, the issue was that when the Israelites took a enemy nation, that they were allowed to take certain of the women who had not known men. And this, of course, had to do with the military situation that existed in the day. And what is often missed by these folks, and I don't even have a clue what the 32 virgin women of Jesus thing is. Since I can't even get the text right, then it's obviously just a flight of fancy imagination. But the normal objection is to the idea of the raping of slave women, et cetera, et cetera. What's normally missed, and again, if you go to Sermon Audio, look up the Holiness Code in the sermon series that I did at PRBC, and look these texts up, I expand upon these things more fully. But what you need to understand is if there was not provision made for these women, once the husbands had either died in battle or been executed, they would be left with no visible means of support in a destroyed area, and basically it was a condemnation to death. This was actually a mechanism whereby life could be saved. We don't view it that way today because we live in very different situations than they did back then, but fundamentally this was a mechanism that would allow for the saving of life and the continuation of individuals and the society, with still very often a real concern concerning the bringing in of idolatry and the temptation to foreign idols. That was all that frequently gets mixed in as well in the situation. But there were a number of texts that we dealt with that from a modern perspective looked so very strange, but from the ancient perspective made perfect sense in the sense they were actually saving people alive. Again, I have no earthly idea what the 32 virgin women of Jesus says because the text reference isn't even right.
I believe that Jesus sanctioned abortion, the killing of the unborn if an unfaithful wife was pregnant. This is the bitter drink that brings the curse from Numbers 5.
This is the one. This is the one I got the most flack on over the last 3 weeks.
Oh, like just from everybody?
From Christians, yeah, because when you use the word abortion in a descriptor to Yahweh, it's almost like, it's blasphemy. So
here's the thing. First, that passage, it is a hard passage. You have to understand a few things. One is that a person, a human person, never kills a child in that passage. If a child exists, which is a hypothetical, even within the context of the passage, and it is a child of an illicit union, then it is killed by God.
Right.
And when God kills, and God kills, it is from a position of divine, holy, and perfect justice.
So the way I wrote it, would you agree I wrote it, I didn't write it in a misleading way? Because I used the word if. I believe that Jesus sanctioned abortion, the killing of the unborn, if an unfaithful wife was pregnant.
I would probably amend it to something along the lines of, and this is on the fly, so don't do this to me in court, but I believe that that God in covenant Trinity, which yes includes Jesus, actually executed the killing of the unborn, him and their self, in that particular case. So it's not a sanctioning of someone else doing it. It's actually God in Trinity performing the execution. So maybe that's even more hardcore than you intended.
Yeah, I would view that as more hardcore.
I believe Jesus sanctioned abortion, killing the unborn, if an unfaithful wife was pregnant. Numbers 5:19-21. Again, the author has no clue how to read the Old Testament or what's going on. That's actually the text concerning the faithfulness test. It has nothing to do with abortion. It has nothing to do with the murder of unborn children. It has to do with a wife who is suspicious and a test, the willingness on her part to undergo this test and to make a vow that she has not been unfaithful to her covenant, has zippity-dippity-doo-dah to do with abortion. If you want anything in the law that has to do with that, look at the striking of the woman who's pregnant, what happens if stillbirth or if the baby's born healthy, etc., etc. But this is just a complete faceplant on the part of the atheist in ignorance of the Old Testament text.
I believe that many dead people came out of the graves when Jesus was cut off. Is it died?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, we've got one big central resurrection, but there are other folks as well, and we already had the talking serpent and the creation ex nihilo. I'm not going to balk at this. So, yes.
Number 6, I believe that many dead people came out of the graves when Jesus died. Matthew 27:52. Once again, yes, I do. So, Jesus rose from the dead. There was a resurrection of saints that were known to the people in Jerusalem at that time period. It was obviously very partial. It was simply emblematic of the resurrection itself that was taking place. There is no expansion upon its meaning. But once again, a Christian who believes Jesus rose from the dead is in a rather odd situation to say, well, Jesus can rise from the dead, but nobody else can. Again, only the fundamentalist, naturalistic materialist would have any issue with this or think that it's embarrassing or something like that. It's recorded for us. No special meaning is attached to it outside of it being one of the accompanying signs of the death of Christ, the tearing of the veil in the temple, etc., etc.
I believe that Jesus ordered that a husband should be the first one to throw a stone at his wife if she leads him away from belief. And again, minor quibble with the anachronism, but yes, God in Trinity with Jesus in agreement. Ordered that a husband should be the first one to throw a stone at his wife if she leads him away from belief. If an execution is going to happen, and now first understand these are instructions to a covenant people that no longer exist, which is the nation of Israel.
Right.
So on the one hand, short answer, yes, I believe this. Longer answer, I don't think it's still relevant to today, right now, this moment. But at that time, if it's time to do the execution, if you are the accuser, you ought not to accuse somebody of a capital crime if you are not morally ready to pull the trigger, throw the stone, whatever it is.
With number 7, I believe that Jesus ordered that a husband should be the first one to throw a stone at his wife if she leads him away from belief, Deuteronomy 13:6-10. Again, another text that I preached upon in the Holiness Code series, where the specific statement was made that even if it is the wife of your bosom, the closest friend that you have, if anyone amongst the covenant people of God secretly is seeking to promulgate idolatry and rebellion amongst the people, that you cannot keep this secret. You cannot keep this private. You are to testify against them before the elders, and that they are to be purged from the people. Again, these are laws for God's covenant people. These are laws for people who, as a nation, have covenanted with God to be his holy people. There are no people like this in the sense of a nation today. This is where the issue of forms of theonomy come in. I have a very high view of God's law and its relevance today, but I also recognize that the penology that was prescribed was a penology given to a covenant people and was to be undertaken by a covenant people, a holy people before God. And hence, if you do not have that today, that the idea of bringing the exact same punishments to bear, when you no longer have a priest, you no longer have one who's actually representing God as far as seeking to promote his glory and his name, who is in covenant with God, when you no longer have that situation, then the issue of the penology, that is the penalties that are to be prescribed, becomes quite problematic. And so number 3 and 7 are both indications of the incredible importance that was attached to fidelity and faithfulness amongst the people of God in the law of God, which, of course, the people of God never lived up to. That's why there had to be a new covenant. That's why Jeremiah chapter 31 is there. That's why there had to be an internal change. The external simply was not sufficient in any way.
So we have the statement, which is, I believe that Jesus stopped Abraham from sacrificing his son, but didn't stop Jephthah from sacrificing his daughter. Okay, so it sounds like you're already somewhat aware that there is some uncertainty as to the nature of Jephthah's sacrifice, whether it was actually to kill her or to virgin her forever. One other thing that I want to mention, Judges is descriptive and almost never prescriptive. Like the purpose of Judges, the entire work in context, is to show just how nasty and screwed up people got and just how quick. The whole thing is God takes his hand off the rudder and look how quickly they go off course. And you'll get a lot of folks who will say, no, whatever Jephthah did, it was a great thing. I'm not here to defend Jephthah. I think Jephthah's actually included in the Bible as an example of what not to do. So whatever he vowed, whether it was to virgin, well, he didn't know what he was vowing. He was like, whatever comes out the door, it's yours. And then, holy smokes, it's his daughter. Okay, well, whatever he did to her, if he killed her, or if he forced her into perpetual virginity, either way, I don't think God was okay with it. I think that was a description of a stupid thing for Jephthah to do. So, yes, I believe that that God in Trinity, same fence before, stopped Abraham from sacrificing his son, but didn't stop Jephthah from whatever it was he did to his daughter, because at that time God had taken his hand off the rudder and was letting Israel show themselves and others just how nasty they got without God's hand on the active rudder.
Abraham from sacrificing his son, but didn't stop Jephthah from sacrificing his daughter. Two things. Obviously shows an extremely shallow, disrespectful view of what happens in regards to Abraham and Isaac. The fact that this becomes, I think, one of the key prophetic pictures of what is going to be happening in the giving of Jesus himself voluntarily upon Calvary's cross. What happens with Jephthah, interestingly enough, in our regular reading of the Old Testament scriptures, that was the text we read a week ago Sunday night at our church as we're working through. Right now we're in Judges, and I read that specific text just a few weeks ago, as I said. And in that context, there's two major understandings as to what took place in regard to Jephthah's daughter. The one way to understand devoted to destruction is that she was killed. Exactly how is not noted, but certainly devoted to destruction can mean that, and that is a possibility. Judges gives us a real insight into God working with a people who, while they possess the Old Testament law, clearly are operating on an extremely low level of ethics and morality, and constantly falling into sin and slavery, and then raising up judges that deliver the people. But very early on, it's a very clear indication that just simply being close to Moses and Joshua chronologically, as far as generations is concerned, does not mean that you're close to them in an understanding of the things of God and really what will come out much more in the prophets. It is a sad picture of the reality of the necessity of the new covenant. the necessity of an inward change, because the people of Israel clearly are not inwardly changed, and so they're constantly in this cycle of apostasy and rebellion and then deliverance. The other option, however, what is interesting is that Jephthah's daughter, and then the establishment of this mourning for Jephthah's daughter, is in reference to what? To her virginity. And so it is just as possible that what happened with Jephthah's daughter is that she remained unmarried. That is, that she remained a virgin, did not have children. Not having children was considered a tremendous burden. And so that the devotion of her was to a life of celibacy and service to God, not to her destruction. Now, again, at the time of the judges, could have gone either direction. We simply are not told. What is mourned is her virginity and not having children. So that's a possibility. But the fact is, we don't know. And there is no connection, of course, logically, rationally, biblically, meaningfully, between the offering of Isaac and the issue of Jephthah at all. Why even put the two of them together? Can't even begin to say.